Echoes in the hallways. The Orion Symphony Hall stood silent at midnight, its grand architecture holding the ghosts of applause from earlier performances. In the dim emergency lighting, Nisha Kapoor moved methodically through the empty corridors, her cleaning cart squeaking softly against the marble floor. At 32, her slender fingers, once destined for concert halls, now wrapped around a mop handle, pushing away the day's debris. She saved the main rehearsal room for last each night. It was her private ritual, a moment of peace before finishing her shift. The magnificent Steinway grand piano stood center stage, its polished ebony surface reflecting the minimal light. Nisha never touched it, not with cleaning supplies, not with her fingers that ached with memory. Tonight, sheet music lay scattered across the floor, unusual for the meticulously organized Orion Symphony. Carefully, she gathered each page, arranging them in what seemed their proper order. The composition was incomplete, full of crossed-out measures and question marks. At the top, Nocturne in B minor, working title, and below it, T. Blackwood, Theo Blackwood, the new musical director who had arrived 6 months ago with a reputation for brilliance and impossible standards. Nisha had glimpsed him occasionally, tall and imposing with prematurely silver-streaked dark hair, perpetually frowning at some internal disappointment. The musicians whispered about his sudden creative drought after years of acclaimed compositions. She placed the pages on the piano bench and continued her work, humming softly. The melody was something from her past, a Hindustani classical piece her grandmother had taught her before Nisha had ventured into Western classical training. "That's in Rag Yaman, isn't it?" The voice startled her. Theo Blackwood stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the hallway light. Nisha immediately lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to disturb anything." "You didn't answer my question," he said, stepping into the room. Up close, she noticed the shadows beneath his eyes, the slight dishevelment of his, otherwise, elegant appearance. "Yes," she replied, surprised. "It's Rag Yaman, my grandmother's favorite." He nodded, approaching the piano. "You organized my mess. I hope I didn't misplace anything important." "It doesn't matter. Nothing worth saving." His fingers brushed over the pages with frustration. "Garbage, really." Nisha kept her eyes on her work, but something in his defeated tone made her pause. "The modulation in measure 27, she said quietly. "Where you've crossed it out. 3 times, perhaps if you borrowed from the Phrygian instead of forcing the minor." She stopped herself, horrified at her presumption. "I apologize. It's not my place." Theo stared at her, truly seeing the night janitor for the first time. "How would you know that?" Nisha gripped her mop tighter. "I should finish my rounds." "Wait." He stepped closer, his composer's curiosity piqued. "You understand music theory?" It wasn't a question, but Nisha answered anyway. "I studied. Once. A long time ago." "Where?" She hesitated. "Juilliard. For 2 years." His eyebrows rose slightly, the first expression besides frustration she'd seen on his face. "And now you're cleaning floors at Orion." "Life happens, Mr. Blackwood." She resumed mopping, signaling the end of the conversation. To her relief, he didn't press further. Instead, he gathered his scattered composition and moved toward the door. Before leaving, he turned. "The Phrygian modulation," he said. "I'll try it." After he left, Nisha allowed herself one small indulgence. She approached the Steinway, hovering her fingers just above the keys without touching them, feeling the phantom music that lived in the spaces between her fingertips and the ivory. Then she returned to her cart, locked up the hall, and walked home through the quiet city streets to her small apartment. The next night, the rehearsal room was immaculate. No scattered papers, no signs of Theo's frustration. But on top of the piano sat a single sheet of staff paper with a revised measure 27, incorporating a Phrygian modulation. In the margin, a single question mark. Nisha stared at it, for a long moment before taking out a pencil from her pocket. With precise movements, she wrote a small notation beside his question mark, then continued her cleaning, leaving the amended sheet exactly where she'd found it. Some conversations needed no words. Satas, left unplayed. 3 weeks passed in a curious dance of absence. Theo and Nisha never occupied the rehearsal hall simultaneously again, yet their conversation continued. Each night, Nisha would find a new musical puzzle waiting. Sometimes an unresolved chord progression, other times a melodic line that trailed into question marks. By morning, Theo would discover her elegant solutions, penned in a different handwriting than his own, always respectful, never overstepping. The cleaning. Supervisor Mrs. Gonzalez noticed Nisha's extended time in the rehearsal room. "You spend too long in there, Beta," she said, using the Hindi term of endearment she'd picked up from Nisha. "The floor doesn't need that much attention." "I'm just being thorough," Nisha replied with a small smile. The truth was more complicated. These musical exchanges had awakened something Nisha had carefully buried for 8 years. Since the day she'd walked away from Juilliard and the crushing weight of expectations. Her father's heart attack had been the catalyst, but the relief she'd felt afterward revealed a deeper truth. She'd been drowning in the competitive pressure, losing her love for music note by note. Tonight she found not just sheet music, but a leather-bound journal on the piano bench. The first page contained a note. "Your thoughts on the complete first movement, TB." This was different, more intimate, more trusting. Nisha sat on the bench, forgetting her cleaning duties as she carefully turned the pages. What had begun as a fragmented nocturne had evolved into something more complex, a piano concerto taking shape, with her subtle suggestions woven seamlessly into the architecture of Theo's composition. For 2 hours, she lost herself in analysis, scribbling thoughts in the margins. Consider echoing this motif in the woodwinds, and the transition at measure. 142 mirrors you're opening beautifully? Intentional? As dawn approached, she realized she'd completed only half her cleaning route. Hastily finishing her duties, she left the journal where she'd found it, her contributions now permanently part of Theo's creative process. When she returned the following evening, the journal was gone, but a small envelope addressed simply to N sat in its place. Inside was a ticket to the Orion Symphony's closed rehearsal session scheduled for the next afternoon, when Nisha would normally be sleeping before her night shift. She shouldn't go. It would cross the boundary they'd established, transform their abstract musical conversation into something real. Yet the ticket burned in her pocket throughout her shift. The next day, against her better judgment, Nisha slipped into the back row of the otherwise empty hall. Theo stood before the orchestra, conducting with restrained intensity, stopping occasionally to adjust a phrase or balance the sections. She recognized the music immediately, the concerto they had crafted together, though no one but them knew of her contribution. Halfway through the movement, Theo stopped abruptly, dissatisfied with the string's interpretation of a passage. No, it needs to have more. He struggled for words. "More longing," Nisha whispered to herself in the darkness. As if hearing her, Theo straightened. "More longing," he told the first violinist, "like you're reaching for something just beyond your grasp." The orchestra began again, and this time, the passage soared with the exact emotional quality Nisha had imagined when making her notations. She left before the rehearsal ended, not ready to be discovered. But as she slipped out the side door, she collided with Dominic Russell, the orchestra's concertmaster, who steadied her with surprise. "Sorry," she mumbled, keeping her head down. "Wait, you're the cleaning staff, aren't you?" His tone contained mild curiosity rather than accusation. "What are you doing at a closed rehearsal?" Before she could answer, a cool voice interrupted. "She's here at my invitation, Dominic." Theo stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Dominic's eyebrows rose. I see. Well, I should get back to my section. He nodded politely and returned inside, leaving Nisha and Theo facing each other directly for the first time since their midnight encounter. You came, Theo said simply. I shouldn't have, Nisha replied, clutching her bag. This was a mistake. No, he said, taking a half step forward. Your suggestions, they've been invaluable. The concerto is coming alive because of them. He paused. Because of you. The weight of recognition hung between them, not just of her musical knowledge, but of her as a person worthy of artistic collaboration. The winter showcase is in 3 weeks, he continued. I'd like you to attend, not just the rehearsal, but the gala afterward. Nisha froze. The winter showcase was the Orion Symphony's most prestigious event, attended by the city's cultural elite and major donors. People like her didn't belong in that world, not anymore. I can't, she whispered. Why not? Because I clean their champagne spills, Mr. Blackwood. I don't drink from the same glasses. Theo studied her face. The person who makes these notations, he said, pulling out the journal from his coat pocket, deserves to hear her music performed. Whatever else you do to pay your bills is irrelevant. Before she could respond, the rehearsal room door opened again, and the orchestra manager called for Theo. He hesitated, then placed a card in her hand. Think about it, he said, returning to his musicians. Nisha looked down at the embossed invitation to the winter showcase, her name written in Theo's distinctive handwriting across the top, and felt the carefully constructed walls between her worlds begin to crumble. Dissonance and harmony. The invitation lay untouched on Nisha's kitchen counter for days, reflecting light each morning as she returned from her shift at Orion Hall. Her nightly exchanges with Theo continued, but neither mentioned the showcase directly. Instead, his notes took on a subtle urgency. This section needs your insight, and I'm struggling with the final movement. Your perspective would be invaluable. On Friday night, Nisha arrived at work to find Priya waiting by the employee entrance. Her younger sister leaned against the wall, scrolling through her phone with brightly painted nails, the same hands that had once reluctantly practiced piano alongside Nisha's more dedicated ones. Surprise inspection, Priya announced with a grin. I brought dinner. In the staff break room, they shared homemade rajma chawal from their mother's recipe. Priya chatted about her nursing classes while Nisha listened, grateful for the distraction from her thoughts about Theo and the showcase. You're quieter than usual, Priya finally observed, studying her sister. What's going on? Reluctantly, Nisha recounted the strange musical partnership that had developed between her and the orchestra's director, ending with the invitation that felt like both opportunity and trap. Priya's eyes widened. You have to go! And wear what? Say what? I don't belong there anymore, Priya. Anymore? Didi, you never stopped belonging in music. You just convinced yourself you did. Priya reached across the table, her voice softening. When Baba got sick, you made a choice to help our family. But that doesn't mean you had to bury your talent forever. It's been 8 years, Nisha whispered. I haven't touched a piano in 8 years. Then maybe it's time. That night after Priya left, Nisha approached the rehearsal room with unusual trepidation. Inside, rather than sheet music, she found a simple note. Playing through the concerto one last time tonight. Main Performance Hall. T. The main hall was typically off-limits during cleaning hours, but Nisha found the door unlocked. She slipped inside, staying in the shadows of the upper balcony. Below, illuminated by a single spotlight, Theo sat at the concert grand piano, playing through passages of their concerto, pausing occasionally to make notes. The music filled the empty hall, no longer fragments but a complete emotional narrative. Hearing it this way, Nisha recognized how seamlessly their musical ideas had intertwined. Her suggestions weren't merely technical corrections, but essential elements of the composition's soul. As Theo reached a particularly challenging section they'd reworked multiple times, his hands faltered. He tried again, but the passage remained elusive. Without conscious decision, Nisha descended the stairs toward the stage. Theo looked up, startled by her footsteps. "It's not working," he admitted. Nisha stood at the edge of the stage. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Theo moved aside on the bench. Nisha sat beside him, her heart thundering as she positioned her hands over the keys for the first time in years. She began tentatively, muscle memory awakening as she played through the troublesome passage. "There," she said softly. "The left hand needs to breathe more between phrases." Theo watched her fingers move across the keys with natural grace. "Show me." They sat shoulder to shoulder, passing the melody between them, four hands occasionally overlapping as they explored possibilities. The years of Nisha's absence from music seemed to dissolve with each note. "Why did you stop playing?" Theo asked during a pause. Nisha's hands stilled. "Family obligations initially. Then, fear, I suppose." "Fear of what?" "Of not being exceptional." She met his eyes. "At Juilliard, being good wasn't enough. And when I left, it seemed easier to stop completely than to be merely ordinary." Theo considered this. "The music we've created together is far from ordinary, Nisha." Before she could respond, the hall doors opened, revealing Eliza Harrington, the Symphony Board chairwoman, accompanied by several board members. Their voices echoed as they approached, discussing fundraising targets for the upcoming showcase. "Theo, darling," Eliza called out, her voice dripping with cultivated charm. "Working late again? We're just doing a final venue check for—" She stopped abruptly, noticing Nisha. "Oh." Nisha immediately stood, the spell broken. "I should continue my rounds." "Wait," Theo said, rising alongside her. "Eliza, this is Nisha Kapoor. She's been helping me refine the concerto." Eliza's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "The cleaning staff? Helping with composition?" The other board members exchanged glances, while Frederick Jensen, the most conservative member, barely concealed his distaste. "How unexpected." "Ms. Kapoor is a former Juilliard student," Theo stated firmly. "Her musical insights have been instrumental to this piece." "How fascinating," Eliza replied with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, we won't interrupt your collaboration, though perhaps traditional working hours might be more appropriate in the future." After they departed, heavy silence hung between Nisha and Theo. "I should go," Nisha said quietly. "They don't matter," Theo insisted. "Their money matters to the symphony, but their opinions about music don't." "But they're right," Nisha replied. "I don't belong here anymore. I made that choice years ago." "Then unmake it," Theo said, closing the distance between them. "Come to the showcase, not as my guest, not as anyone's charity case, but as my musical equal. As the co-creator of this concerto." Nisha looked up at him, feeling the weight of possibility. "And if I say no, then I'll announce at the showcase that the piece was a collaboration with an anonymous partner, because I won't take sole credit for what we created together." In that moment, standing on the stage where she once dreamed of performing, Nisha made her decision. "I'll need something to wear," she said. The unexpected cadence. The night of the winter showcase arrived with crystalline clarity, the December air sharp with promise. Inside Orion Hall, warmth radiated from countless candles and the excited murmurs of the city's cultural elite gathering in their finery. Backstage, Theo paced in his tuxedo, glancing repeatedly at his watch. The orchestra was tuning, the donors were arriving, and Nisha, despite her promise, was nowhere to be seen. "10 minutes to curtain, maestro," the stage manager announced. Theo nodded distractedly, his mind replaying their last conversation. After agreeing to attend, Nisha had vanished from their nightly exchanges. For an entire week, he'd found the rehearsal room exactly as he'd left it, his notes untouched. Had the board members' reactions pushed her away permanently? In the green room, Eliza Harrington was holding court among major donors. Theo's new concerto is quite revolutionary, she was saying. The board had some concerns initially, but we've always encouraged artistic freedom. Theo resisted the urge to contradict her directly. Instead, he checked his phone one last time before surrendering it for the performance. No messages. As he made his final preparations, Dominic approached. "Interesting choice, crediting an anonymous collaborator in the program," the concertmaster remarked. "The board is buzzing about it." "It's the truth," Theo replied simply. "Is she coming? Your mysterious janitor with the Juilliard background?" Before Theo could answer, the 5-minute call sounded. With a final glance toward the stage door, he straightened his jacket and prepared to face the audience alone. The hall lights dimmed as Theo took the podium to enthusiastic applause. He raised his baton, making eye contact with each section before beginning the concerto. The music flowed exactly as they'd written it, each phrase carrying the imprint of their late-night collaboration. But something was missing. The spark that had come alive when Nisha's hands had joined his on the keys. Midway through the first movement, a subtle shift in the audience drew his attention. A latecomer was being quietly seated in the front row, a woman in a midnight blue silk sari embroidered with silver threads that caught the stage lights. Nisha had arrived, her hair swept up elegantly, but her expression reflected the same quiet dignity she carried while pushing her cleaning cart. Their eyes met across the distance, and the music between them reignited. Theo's conducting became more fluid, more passionate, as if they were once again sharing the piano bench, speaking through melody rather than words. When intermission arrived, Theo found himself surrounded by admirers praising the composition. He accepted their compliments with distracted politeness, searching the crowd for Nisha. He found her standing alone near a pillar, observing the socializing with watchful eyes. "You came," he said, echoing their words from weeks before. "I helped create this," she replied. "I needed to hear it breathe. It breathes differently with you here." He gestured to the program in her hand. "You saw the credit? In collaboration with NK," she read. "Subtle, but truthful." He hesitated. "After intermission—" "Theo, darling," Eliza interrupted, approaching with Frederick Jensen and an elderly man Theo recognized as Winston Carver, the symphony's most generous benefactor. "You must meet Winston properly. He's absolutely entranced by the first movement." Introductions were made, during which Eliza deliberately excluded Nisha from the circle. Winston, however, noticed her standing slightly apart. "And who might this lovely lady be?" he asked with genuine warmth. Before Theo could speak, Nisha stepped forward. "Nisha Kapoor," she said with quiet confidence. "I'm the NK in your program." Frederick's expression soured. "The cleaning woman? Really, Theo, this joke has gone far enough." "It's not a joke," Theo stated firmly. "Ms. Kapoor is a gifted musician whose contributions were essential to the concerto." Winston studied Nisha with newfound interest. "Fascinating. Tell me, my dear, what aspects did you contribute?" As Nisha began explaining her work on the harmonic, "Structure," Eliza cut in. "How charming, but the second half is about to begin and I'm sure Ms. Kapoor wouldn't want to miss it from her seat." "Actually," Theo said, making a split-second decision that would change everything, "I'd like Nisha to join me for the piano solo in the third movement." Stunned silence followed. "Impossible," Frederick sputtered. "She's not contracted, not rehearsed." "She knows the piece better than anyone," Theo insisted. "It's partly hers." Nisha's eyes widened. "Theo, I haven't performed in years. I can't just—" "Can't you?" he challenged. After all our nights rebuilding this music together? Winston Carver's laughter broke the tension. Well, this is the most exciting showcase in years. I, for one, would love to see this unexpected collaboration. With the benefactor's blessing, Eliza and Frederick could only exchange worried glances as the second-half announcement sounded. Backstage, Nisha trembled. "This is madness. I'm not prepared." "Yes, you are," Theo assured her. "You've been preparing for this since the first note you suggested to me." As the orchestra launched into the second movement, Nisha stood in the wings, her heart thundering, in counterpoint to the music. When the third movement approached, Theo gave her a nod. Taking a deep breath, Nisha stepped onto the stage where, in another life, she might have stood as a featured soloist rather than the woman who polished its floors after hours. The audience murmured in confusion as she took her place at the piano. Theo raised his baton, their eyes locked in perfect understanding, and together they began the final movement of a concerto built from midnight exchanges and courage rediscovered. Her fingers found the keys with unexpected certainty, muscle memory returning like an old friend. As the music swelled around her, Nisha finally understood. She had never truly left this world. She had merely been standing in its shadows, waiting for the courage to step back into the light. Coda of new beginnings. Dawn painted the empty concert hall in gentle gold as Nisha sat alone at the grand piano, replaying moments from the previous night. Her fingers traced the keys without pressing them, still feeling the aftershocks of her unexpected return to performance. The showcase had ended in thunderous applause. Not just polite appreciation, but genuine awe at the seamless partnership between conductor and pianist. Winston Carver had been the first to rise for a standing ovation, followed by the entire audience, their faces a blur through Nisha's tears. What followed was more surreal. The gala reception, where she moved among people who had never before, looked her in the eye, though she had cleaned their empty champagne glasses for years. Some avoided her, clearly uncomfortable with the disruption of social hierarchies. Others, particularly the musicians, embraced her with genuine respect, asking about her training and her contributions to the concerto. Through it all, Theo had remained close by, neither protective nor possessive, but standing as her equal in their shared creation. Now, in the quiet aftermath, Nisha played a simple melody, the first piece her grandmother had taught her, letting its familiar patterns center her in this unfamiliar new reality. "I thought I might find you here." Theo's voice echoed from the entrance. He approached slowly, still in his rumpled tuxedo shirt, bow tie undone. "Couldn't sleep either?" "Too much adrenaline," she admitted, "or too many questions." He sat beside her on the bench, not touching the piano. "What happens now, you mean?" "Exactly." Nisha stopped playing. "Last night doesn't change who I am. I still have rent to pay, a family to help support." "It could change things," Theo suggested carefully. "Winston Carver cornered me after you left. He wants to establish a community education program at Orion, teaching, outreach, bringing music to neighborhoods that never access the symphony." He paused. "He wants you to lead it." Nisha stared at him in disbelief. "Me? I'm a janitor with an incomplete degree." "You're a musician who helped create one of the most talked-about premieres in Orion's recent history." Theo turned to face her directly. "You belong in music, Nisha. You always did. And cleaning floors? Was that just some detour in your eyes?" "No." His answer came with surprising firmness. "It was your path. It brought you here, to this moment. There's dignity in every kind of work, but there's also no shame in returning to an abandoned dream when the opportunity presents itself." Morning. Light strengthened around them as Nisha considered his words. Through the hall's windows, she could see Mrs. Gonzalez and the day-cleaning staff arriving, preparing for their shift. "I'd need to give proper notice," she said finally, "and finish my degree eventually." "So that's a yes?" It's a maybe. She smiled slightly. A tentative, cautious maybe. Theo nodded, understanding her hesitation. "What are you playing?" he asked, changing the subject. "Something my grandmother taught me. It's a folk melody from her village." "Show me." Nisha demonstrated the simple, haunting tune. Theo listened intently, then placed his hands on the keys, adding a complementary bass line that enhanced without overwhelming her melody. "We make good music together," he observed. "Yes," she agreed softly. "We do." They played together as morning fully bloomed, their improvisation weaving between classical structures and folk traditions, creating something neither could have made alone. Later that week, Mrs. Gonzalez found Nisha emptying her locker. "So, it's true," the supervisor said. "You're leaving us for the fancy music people." "Not entirely," Nisha replied, handing her the official letter. "I'll be splitting my time for now. Half here, half developing the new community program." Mrs. Gonzalez nodded approvingly. "Good. Don't forget where you came from." "I couldn't if I tried," Nisha said, embracing the older woman. That evening, Nisha entered the rehearsal room not with a cleaning cart, but with a portfolio of ideas for the community program. Theo was already there discussing possibilities with Dominic and several other orchestra members who had volunteered to teach. "Perfect timing," Theo said as she entered. "We were just debating where to begin." "I have some thoughts about that," Nisha replied, spreading her notes across the piano they had once used for their secret exchange. "The Westridge neighborhood has 3 schools without music programs, and the community center needs—" "Ms. Kapoor," a cool voice interrupted. Eliza Harrington stood in the doorway, Frederick Jensen hovering behind her. "May we have a word?" Theo stepped forward protectively, but Nisha placed a hand on his arm. "It's all right," she murmured, following the board members into the hallway. "This program has the board's conditional approval," Eliza began without preamble. "But understand that Orion Symphony has standards. Your unusual background might make for a charming story, but this institution's reputation—" "With all due respect, Mrs. Harrington," Nisha interrupted, her voice steady, "my unusual background is precisely what this program needs. I understand what it means to believe art belongs to someone else. I know what it's like to stand outside looking in." She straightened, meeting Eliza's gaze directly. "I cleaned these halls for 3 years. I know every corner of this building, every family that attends regularly, and every empty seat that could be filled with someone who thinks they don't belong here. That knowledge isn't a liability, it's an asset." Frederick began to protest, but Eliza studied Nisha with new consideration. "Winston is quite taken with you," she said finally, "and he's promised substantial funding contingent on your involvement." "I don't want special treatment," Nisha replied. "Just a fair chance." "Then prove us wrong," Eliza challenged. "Show us this program can succeed without compromising our standards." After they departed, Nisha returned to the rehearsal room, where concerned faces awaited her. "Everything all right?" Theo asked. "Yes," she said with newfound certainty. "They need convincing, but that's what music does best, isn't it? Convinces us to feel things we didn't expect." As they resumed planning, Nisha realized that the boundaries between worlds, between janitor and musician, between outsider and artist, were far more permeable than she had believed. Her journey had never been a straight line from promise to fulfillment, but rather a complex composition with unexpected modulations and returns to themes once abandoned. 6 months later, on a warm spring evening, Nisha stood before a group of teenagers from Westridge in Orion Hall's small rehearsal space. Their faces, uncertain, hopeful, brilliant with possibility, reminded her of herself at their age. "Music isn't just for people who can afford lessons," she told them, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had crossed between worlds. It belongs to anyone willing to listen deeply enough to hear their own voice within it. From the doorway, Theo watched silently, witnessing the completion of their unexpected duet, a composition that had begun with scattered notes left on a piano and evolved into something neither of them could have created alone. As Nisha demonstrated a passage, her hands moving confidently across the keys, she caught his eye and smiled. Between them hung the unspoken understanding that the most powerful harmonies often emerge from the most unlikely combinations, and that every new beginning carries within it echoes of all that came before.